morning.
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 Got the gate right so far, so that's good.
Yeah.
It is tricky. We'll let you begin your remarks when you are ready.
Thank you. And I want to start by thanking the members of the committee that I was able to meet with and taking time out of your busy schedules to meet with me and for your service on the committee. As I was able to talk with some of you, I serve currently on the District 2B nominating commission, so I know how much time all of you have donated to your service on this committee. I was born and raised on a farm south of Manning, a small town in western Iowa of about 1,500 people. After high school, I attended college here in Des Moines at Grandview University and would later attend law school at Drake University here also in Des Moines. During this time, I was able to gain valuable experience by working at the Attorney General's office in the Consumer Protection Division and Sexually Violent Predator Division, interning with a judge in Polk County, working at the Drake Legal Clinic, and clerking at a relatively large Des Moines law firm. Upon graduation from law school, I was left with a choice between a job at the relatively large Des Moines law firm or returning home and trying to find a job there. I made what I thought was a difficult decision at the time, and perhaps a decision that no one else would make, by opting to return to Manning and joining a small firm in a neighboring town of Carroll. At the time, I wasn't sure I was making the right decision. But now as I look back, I can say without hesitation it was the best decision that I've ever made. I was immediately given responsibility that most first-year lawyers would never have or receive anywhere else. I wrote my first appellate brief before I was admitted to the bar, and luckily, due to the filing deadlines in that case, I was able to file that brief under my signature the same day that I was admitted to the bar. From that point on, I never looked back. The nature of my general rural practice has required me to handle cases in several areas of law, both civil and criminal. It would not be uncommon for me on any given day to deal with a personal injury case, a real estate matter, a trust or estate dispute, a juvenile matter, a mental health committal, or some other type of civil dispute, like some of the ones that I referenced in my application. Almost no 2 days are the same. Outside the practice of law, returning to the small rural community I grew up in has provided opportunities to be a part of that community that I never anticipated. It has also, on occasion, provided some perspective. For example, a few weeks ago, I was headed up to my office in Manning in the early evening to catch up on some work, as I had been out of the office that day meeting with some of you. As I drove up to the office, I drove past a couple that I knew, and I waved at them, although in Manning, you wave at everybody whether you know them or not.
Yeah.
And I made it about a block before my cell phone started ringing, and I looked at my phone, and it was one of the people that I had just driven past. So I answered. And they said, "You need to turn around and come back over to our house and have a beer on the deck. We haven't seen you all summer. We want to know what you've been up to." And I tried to explain to them that, I was kind of busy and I needed to get up to the office to get caught up on some things. But of course, that was a wholly unsatisfactory answer.
Mm-hmm.
So as I sat on their deck having a beer, thinking about all the work that I could be doing, I realized that I was glad that I did come over, because I got to hear about how their young grandson had just been over to visit and how he really liked going on lawnmower rides, and how he liked having smoothies from one of the local shops in town. And I think you can kind of see where this story is going here. Envision a grandmother giving her son a ride on the lawnmower across town to the smoothie shop. That is something that you only see in a rural Iowa community. And I can guarantee you that everyone in Manning that day that witnessed that didn't think anything of it. Many of you in our interviews posed the question to me of why I wanted to be a judge in the Court of Appeals. Since my time in law school, I have always been interested in the legal research and writing aspect of law, and it's something that I've always enjoyed. And I believe that I do both well. In law school, I had the ability to interact with several judges, and it was during those interactions that I started to become interested in the work judges do, and especially the work that appellate court judges do. The judges that I interact with now have continually encouraged me to pursue a judicial career. To me, that not only speaks to their faith in me, but their belief that I would make a good appellate judge. Some of you also asked me in our interviews what I look for in a judge in my work on the District 2B nominating commission. Well, I believe there are differences between the skill set needed of a district court judge versus an appellate court judge. There are some core traits that I believe apply to both. One is the ability to step back from a situation and see both sides of an issue and be able to weigh the pros and cons of a party's position. A second is the ability to research and communicate effectively through writing to explain a position. Another is the person's demeanor or temperament and how I believe that person will deal with other individuals who may not always share the same point of view. Not only do I believe that I have this skill set, but the letters of support that I have received confirm it. I believe my broad experience in the legal profession, my legal research and legal writing ability, and the possession of these other core traits that I just discussed will allow me to fit right in on the Court of Appeals while serving the people of Iowa. And I'd welcome any questions anyone has.
Thank you. We'll start our questioning with Commissioner Hoytink. And Aaron, I will ask that you, I know you want to face Commissioner Hoytink, but if you could move the mic closer to
Sure.
you so you're heard.
Good morning. Looking at your application, it appears you have argued or been involved in 12 appeals. Can you describe the nature of those appeals? Were they civil or criminal in nature?
Well, as my involvement in the assistant county attorney, they would all be civil in nature as the criminal appeals go to the AG's office. And as far as the civil ones, they are, I don't think no two have ever been in the same area of law, so they've been pretty broad.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chase,
Thank you for your application. I don't have any questions for you.
Commissioner Pearson.
I too thank you for your application. And would you please tell us about your pro bono experience?
Sure. I've been able to speak with a couple of the commissioners, but my pro bono experience is, not something I necessarily keep track of hours or the types of cases that I do, but it would be, routine where someone would walk in off the street and need to see a lawyer, and I would sit with them, and it may be advising them on, whether they have a case or maybe there's something going on in their life where they just need some advice. I mean, sometimes I don't even think it's necessarily legal advice that they're looking for. And sometimes, they've received a letter or something like that and would have questions about it. That's maybe some of the easier, things that lawyers can do to be engaged in the community. On the other end, there would be time to time where I would be involved in a family law matter. It just seems to be usually family law matters are the ones where, the people are involved in situations and they can't necessarily afford an attorney to get them through that situation. So in those cases, if I'm able, I take those cases and try to help them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Picklap.
No questions, thanks.
Commissioner Gray.
Mr. Ahrendsen, I know you've tried jury trials. Two questions. First, you have learned more when you win or when you lose?
Lose.
Yeah. What's the most important lesson you've learned in trying a jury trial?
I think the most important thing is never to take anything for granted that you think is obvious. Because I can tell you that sometimes when you have a chance to speak with the jury afterwards, some fact or some key point that you thought was just so clear and obvious that you never brought it up is something that you went clean over their head, and because of it, it may have altered their decision-making process.
Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you so much for applying. What is the most challenging litigation you've ever handled and why?
Well, I think it would be probably one of the cases. Well, it turned into 2 or 3 cases, but the trust litigation, that consolidated matter that I handled, it was very difficult, namely because of some of the other personalities involved in the case that really prevented the case from being done when it should have been done. And it took a tremendous amount of time and effort to finally get that case to the resolution to where the clients could receive the recovery that they, at least in my view, and I think in the court's view too, should have happened several years before it did.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bevel.
Thank you. We got to talk about diversity of life experience. You coming from Manning, and I was concerned about people had you been around people different? And could you share with the commission your experience when you came to Grandview?
Yeah, from being on a small rural community, my experience at Grandview was, I guess, got me out of my comfort zone probably in the first 10 seconds because my roommate, I was relatively decent at golf, so I was playing golf on scholarship there, so they paired, all the golfers together, so at least you would be with somebody that kind of had the same schedule. And my roommate was from South Africa, and it was his first time ever being in the States. So that was my first experience when I walked through the doors. I had someone in there from South Africa. And it was really fascinating to be able to just see America from their point of view, never being there before. In a way, I was responsible for him in a fair amount because I had to drive him everywhere and make sure he, didn't do anything that would be illegal or anything like that. I kind of got some maybe unwanted responsibility there, but it was all good in the end.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hoig?
What do you think would be your biggest challenge from what you do now to becoming a judge in the Court of Appeals?
I think the biggest challenge would be, obviously the workload that the Court of Appeals has is substantial. I think I probably don't have quite that workload, but it also requires substantial involvement. But I think probably any judge could say this, is that when they get involved, they're going to see, cases on everything under the sun that comes before the court. And while I feel like I, have rather broad experience, I'm sure there's going to be cases that come up where I, have never dealt with or been involved in that area of law. So I think in those cases, there'll be a bit of a learning curve to be able to get up to speed. But I guess those are the same things that I do in my practice when someone comes in. Resort to Google first and see what shows up. So I think I'd be able to, overcome whatever new areas that I would encounter.
Thank you.
Commissioner Henderson?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Stanger?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Grayberg?
I'll ask a follow-up question. Sometimes you win things, sometimes you don't. If you did not get this appointment, what would you do?
Well, I'd go back to my office and continue the workload that I already have. I've been fortunate that I landed in a good firm with good colleagues, so I will continue on there and wait for the next vacancy, and I shall return.
Sounds like a threat. Commissioner O'Brien?
Thank you. Do I hear that you're not very interested in the district court, perhaps because you have more of a commitment to writing and research?
Well, that is part of it, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Ahrendsen, you write in your application that you have the temperament that matches what is needed of a good judge. Can you describe your temperament? Obviously, we've been able to see it here on display this morning, but can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think I've always tried to approach all the cases I've been involved in with a fairly level head, and maybe at the beginning sit down and figure out what the strengths and weaknesses of a case are going to be. And I know the lawyers on the commission will understand, sometimes rather rapidly that gets screwed up by people that are involved in the case, whether it be clients or opposing parties. But I always, at least I feel like then I can ground my conversation, in law and what I think, the facts are going to be in the case to be able to move that case forward to a conclusion. And, I think I've done that rather well with the attorneys that I've worked with based on the letters of support that I've received from, many of the attorneys that I've had cases against.
Commissioner Parrish?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yeah, thank you. Aaron, so you mentioned that you have been serving on the District 2B Nominating Commission. You also talked about how in that role there might be some things you look for in nominees that you maybe, if you were serving on this commission, you may not necessarily be looking for. There's some differences between those two commissions. Commissioner Gray mentioned jury trial experience. Is that one of those things that you'd be looking for more for this vacancy or 2B? Or can you speak to those differences that you might be looking for on this commission as opposed to 2B?
Well, I think any judge needs the core traits that I talked about in my opening, but some of the differences that I would be looking for on the 2B commission would be jury trial experience, because the district court judges are in control of, all of the jury trials, or, well, a vast majority of them. And, their ability to, make judgment decisions in the courtroom, because there's a lot of decisions going on in a trial that need to be made without a lot of time, to research them and think them through. So to me, in my mind, there needs to be a certain level of comfort, with jury trials and in that decision-making process. And I think as a district court judge, you deal with, you know, more personalities because you have the other lawyers, you have the clients, you have witnesses, and you're trying to control all that versus, you know, an appellate court judge where you do have time to step back and think about the arguments that are being presented and read the record and see what happened below. And in those cases, I think the research and writing aspect of the skill set is more important than it would be for a district court judge.
Commissioner Spies?
Thank you. Mr. Ahrendsen, when you and I spoke, of course, I know that you play golf at an elite level, and so you must have skills of composure. But you know, you're young, and I wanted to ask if your youth gives you a leg up on some of the technical and scientific and biological challenges that face the court, having some proficiency and some confidence in those.
Well, I do think that probably even currently and in the future, the court's going to continue to see issues with technology come before them. And not to say that more senior members of the court wouldn't have the skills to figure that out. I do think it could help to have someone a bit younger on the court that has probably maybe even used some of this technology and has kind of a background of what some of this stuff is and how it works.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Aaron, for your application, and we look forward to deliberating it later this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.